He got the house, the will, and everything, then asked me for a loan. When our dad passed, my brother inherited it all. I got nothing, until I uncovered a hidden account, a forged signature, and a sister I never knew existed. Now the family secrets are unraveling, and the truth is way worse than I imagined. You know that moment when you think your life is about to change for the better, and then it just collapses underneath you? That was me, sitting in a stuffy lawyer's office in Georgia, listening to some guy in a wrinkled suit read my dad's will like he was narrating a bedtime story. The room was quiet, too quiet. My older brother Mark leaned back in his chair like he owned the place. Maybe because, as I was about to find out, he basically did. Our dad had passed 2 weeks earlier. Heart attack. Sudden. No goodbyes. No last words. Just a phone call from the hospital that changed everything. We weren't close, my dad and I. But we weren't enemies either. We just existed in each other's orbits. Mark was the golden boy. High school quarterback, college grad, married young. I was the kid who went to trade school and fixed HVACs for a living. Dad never said it, but I always knew who his favorite was. Still, I figured he'd leave things equal. That's what fair people do, right? Well, turns out I had no idea who my dad really was. The lawyer cleared his throat and started reading the will. I zoned out until I heard my name. To my son Ryan, I leave my tools and workbench, and a small savings account totaling $5,000. I blinked. Thought maybe he misspoke. 5,000? That was it? My hands started to sweat. Mark shot me this look, half pity, half smug. I hated that look. Then the lawyer kept going. To my eldest son Mark, I leave the house, the vehicles, my stocks, retirement account, and all remaining assets. I couldn't breathe. That had to be a mistake. The house alone was worth over $400,000. Dad had 2 vehicles, not to mention a portfolio he bragged about every Christmas. I interrupted. Wait, what? That's it? That's all I get? The lawyer nodded politely, like this happened every day. That's what's written here. I looked at Mark. He didn't say a word. Didn't defend me. Didn't offer to split anything. He just sat there, quiet as a tomb. After the meeting, he had the nerve to pat me on the back and say, "You'll be alright, bro. You've always been resourceful." I didn't punch him. I wanted to. But I didn't. Instead, I walked out and sat in my truck for what felt like an hour, trying to figure out what had just happened. My dad had basically cut me out of his legacy like I never existed. Over the next few days, reality hit hard. Bills started piling up. My rent was due. Work had been slow the past month. My girlfriend, Amanda, was getting tired of the financial stress. We were living paycheck to paycheck, and now I was sitting on $5,000 that wouldn't even cover 2 months of expenses. And Mark? He moved into Dad's house with his wife and started remodeling it the same week. Posted pictures on social media with captions like, "Fresh starts. Grateful for family." I nearly threw my phone at the wall. 3 weeks later, I got a text from him that said, "Hey bro, can we talk? Need a favor." I ignored it. The next day he called. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity won. "Hey Ryan. Listen, this is awkward, but I need to borrow some money." I laughed. Loud. The kind of laugh that hurts your stomach. "You serious?" I asked. "You inherited $500,000 and you need my help?" He sighed. "We hit a snag with the remodel. The contractors want payment up front, and my funds are temporarily tied up in the estate transfer. I just need a short-term loan. A few thousand. I'll pay you back." I stared at the wall in my apartment. Paint peeling, sink leaking. The only thing I inherited from our dad was a beat-up workbench and a savings account that could barely pay for new tires. And now he wanted a loan? "You've got some nerve, Mark," I said. "Seriously. It's not like that. I'm good for it. You know I am." I hung up on him. That night Amanda and I got into a fight. She'd been hinting at moving back in with her parents to save money. I didn't blame her. We were drowning. And to make things worse, I found out Mark was renting out the basement of Dad's house for extra income. He hadn't told me. Someone else did, an old neighbor. He was making money off the house already, and still asking me for help. That's when I decided something. If Mark was going to treat me like I didn't matter, then I'd return the favor. But not just by ignoring him. I wanted answers. Why had Dad written me off like that? Why did Mark act like it was normal? I started digging. First, I requested a full copy of the will, not just the part read aloud. Then I went through Dad's old emails. I still had access to his laptop because I'd helped him with it last year. What I found made my blood run cold. There was an email, dated 6 months before his death. Subject line: "Need to revise the will." It was sent to his lawyer. The body of the email said, "I want to ensure both my sons are taken care of. Mark has already done well for himself. Ryan's had a harder road. Let's adjust accordingly." But the will wasn't changed. The lawyer had ignored it, or someone had. I suddenly had more questions than answers. And I wasn't letting this go. I didn't sleep that night. Not after seeing that email. It sat there in Dad's inbox like a ghost whispering. You were supposed to get more. I read it 10 times over, making sure I wasn't imagining things. He'd clearly asked the lawyer to revise the will. The part that really got me? Ryan's had a harder road. That was the first time I'd seen any sign that he understood me. He wasn't blind after all. He knew I struggled. That I worked 12-hour days in the cold, sweating and freezing through every season. That Amanda and I had barely scraped together enough for groceries some months. He knew, and he tried to do the right thing. So why hadn't it happened? I called the lawyer the next day. I'm sorry, he said, in that professional tone that makes your blood boil. I can't discuss private communications with third parties. I'm not a third party. I snapped. I'm his son. And I found an email he sent you. He wanted the will changed. There was a pause. Then, carefully, he said, Mr. Taylor, I'm going to have to refer you to my firm's policy on privacy. Click. He hung up on me. Something was very, very wrong. I thought about hiring a lawyer, but I didn't have the money. Amanda was already hinting about getting a second job. We were both burnt out, and I was spiraling, financially, emotionally, everything. So I did what any desperate man would do. I drove to the lawyer's office. I showed up in my work clothes, covered in grease and sweat. Walked right past the receptionist, ignored her protests, and slammed my hand down on the front desk. Let me talk to Mr. Peterson. He came out 5 minutes later, looking annoyed and slightly nervous. I didn't give him a chance to speak. You messed with my dad's will. Or someone did. I saw the email. He wanted it changed. You didn't change it. That's fraud. He adjusted his tie. Ryan, I understand you're upset. Don't patronize me. I snapped. I want the truth. Right now. Another long pause. Then, something I didn't expect. He changed his mind. The lawyer said quietly. I have it in my notes. He came in 2 weeks later and decided to leave things as they were. Do you have a signed document saying that? He hesitated. No. I stared at him. My fists clenched so tight I could feel my nails digging into my palms. Then it's your word against his. I said. And I left. That night, Amanda sat next to me on the couch while I told her everything. She didn't say much. Just held my hand. I always thought your dad didn't see how hard you worked. She finally said. I guess he did. Too little, too late. I couldn't let it go. Something didn't add up. Why would Dad take the time to write that email, then not follow through? Then I remembered something. Mark had power of attorney. My stomach turned. I pulled up the files on Dad's laptop again. Searched for Mark's name. And there it was, an email from Dad to the law firm, CCing Mark. It was about the estate. Routine stuff. But buried near the bottom was a line that made me sit up straight. Let's schedule a call next week. Mark wants to be present. Mark was there. At the meeting where the will was supposed to be revised. Suddenly I had a theory. What if Dad had tried to make the change, but Mark convinced him otherwise? Or worse, what if Mark talked to the lawyer afterward and made sure nothing got updated? I didn't want to believe my own brother could do something that dirty. But then again, he'd already shown his true colors. Asking me for money while sitting in a house he didn't earn? I needed proof. So I reached out to Dad's old friend, Bill. He was our neighbor growing up and practically family. A retired accountant with a long memory and a blunt way of speaking. When I told him what was going on, he let out a low whistle. Your dad told me he was planning to leave you the garage. He said. Not just the tools. The whole building. Said you could start your own repair shop someday. My jaw tightened. That never made it into the will. Bill shook his head. Sounds like someone interfered. He paused, then looked me dead in the eyes. Ryan, I'm not saying you should burn bridges. But you might want to start digging. Because if your brother tampered with that will, that's a felony. The next day, I got a call from Mark. Still mad at me? He asked, half joking. I didn't answer. I was thinking. He continued. Maybe I could cut you in on the basement rental. I'm making about $1,000 a month. It's not much, but it's something. He said it like he was doing me a favor. I bit back the anger and forced my voice to stay calm. Why the change of heart? There was a pause. I talked to Mom. Our mom passed away 10 years ago. You mean her grave? I asked. No. I mean I read her journals. Been cleaning out some boxes. She wrote about you. Said she was proud of how hard you worked. Said Dad didn't always show it, but he cared. I didn't trust this sudden burst of sentiment. But I played along. That's nice to hear. Then he dropped something that made my skin crawl. You know, Dad was planning to sell the house before he died. He only kept it because I convinced him not to. Why? So it would stay in the family. I stared at the wall. My hands shook. That wasn't why. He convinced Dad to keep the house, because he wanted it. Everything was starting to make sense. I wasn't just written out of the will. I was cut out on purpose. And Mark had made sure of it. I sat there, gripping my phone, staring at nothing. Mark's voice echoed in my head. I convinced him to keep the house. That wasn't love for family. That was planning. It hit me harder than I expected. This wasn't just some oversight or forgotten signature. It was intentional. I'd been cut out of my own family's legacy, and the person holding the knife was the guy I used to share bunk beds with. I told Amanda everything. She didn't even hesitate. We're going after him. Legally? I asked. No, she said. Not yet. First, we find out everything. No more guessing. No more speculation. We find the receipts. And that's when the real digging began. Dad wasn't big on paper trails, but he kept a small fireproof box under his bed. I remembered him pulling it out once when I was in high school to show me my birth certificate. After the funeral, Mark had said he already took care of Dad's personal effects. But what he didn't know was that Dad had a second stash. Bill, our old neighbor, let it slip during one of our chats. Your dad used to come over and hide stuff in my basement freezer when he didn't trust the house. Said it was his insurance plan. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I drove straight to Bill's place that night. He led me down into the basement, past the old workbench and a stack of unopened lawn furniture boxes. Then he pointed to an ancient chest freezer humming in the corner. Inside, beneath a layer of frozen bread and ground beef, was a thick manila envelope. It was marked, "For Ryan, if things go sideways." My throat went dry. Inside was a handwritten letter, a USB drive, and a bank statement from a credit union I didn't recognize. The letter was dated 9 months before Dad died. Ryan, if you're reading this, then something didn't go the way I planned. I don't know if I changed the will in time, or if Mark got in the middle of things. I tried to be fair. I know you've had a tougher road. I set aside some money for you in a separate account, under your name. It's not much, but enough to get you started if you ever want to open that garage we used to talk about. Passwords are on the USB. Don't tell your brother. Do something good with it. Dad. My hands were shaking. Amanda was standing beside me, eyes wide. Holy crap. Your dad tried to help you. He really did. We rushed home and opened the USB. There were scans of documents, login info for an online bank account, and a PDF with a simple title. Ryan's Business Fund, $78,429.78. I stared at the screen for a full minute. $78,000. That was more than enough for a down payment on a small commercial space, some basic equipment, and enough runway to survive the slow months. But why hide it? Because Dad didn't trust Mark. That much was clear. Now I had a decision to make. Do I keep this to myself, build my shop in secret, and let Mark live in ignorant bliss? Or do I confront him? Force the truth into the open and risk losing what little relationship we had left? Amanda voted for silence. Use it, she said. It's finally something that's yours. Your dad wanted it that way. Let Mark keep the house and his ego. You don't need to fight anymore. But I couldn't leave it alone. Not after what he did. So I called him. Hey, I said, my voice as calm as I could manage. I need to talk to you. In person. He agreed. We met at a diner halfway between our places. He showed up in a button-down shirt and khakis, looking like a suburban dad on his lunch break. I didn't even bother with small talk. I found the letter. The account. The stash Dad left me. His face went pale. What? He left money for me. Separately. Because he didn't trust you. He didn't deny it. That was the part that surprised me most. Instead, he leaned back and sighed. I told him it would be cleaner to just keep everything in one place. I didn't take anything, Ryan. I just simplified. Simplified? I said. You erased me from the will. I didn't erase you. I talked to him. I explained that I could manage things better. I'm stable. You're. Say it. I said, voice sharp. You're reckless. You've always been the wild card. I didn't want you blowing it. I laughed. Bitterly. You didn't want me to have it. That's the truth. He looked down at his coffee. Maybe. That one word lit a fire inside me. You want a loan? Here's the deal, I said, leaning in. I'll give you a loan. 10 grand. No interest. In return, you sign a contract admitting you interfered with Dad's will. You write down every step of what you did, and you sign it. His eyes narrowed. You're blackmailing me. No, I said. I'm offering you a deal. You want the money? You tell the truth. He didn't answer right away. Finally, he pushed his coffee aside. I'll think about it. I walked out of that diner feeling both heavier and lighter at the same time. I didn't know what he would do. Maybe he'd call my bluff. Maybe he'd try to lawyer up. But I knew one thing for sure. For the first time in a long time, I held the cards. And I wasn't folding anytime soon. I spent the next 2 days waiting for Mark's response. He didn't call, didn't text, didn't even like my sarcastic Facebook post that said, "Funny how blood only matters until money gets involved." Then, out of the blue, I got a knock on the door. It was a courier with a manila envelope. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "I won't sign your confession. But I'll take the loan. $10,000. I'll pay you back within 90 days. Attached was his signature and banking info. No apology. No explanation. Amanda was livid. "He's not even denying it anymore. He basically admitted everything and just wants cash." "I know," I said. "But now I've got it in writing that he asked me for money. And that gives me leverage." Amanda looked at me. "You're really gonna lend it to him?" "I am," I said. "Because I want to see what he does when the power shifts." So I sent him the 10 grand. The next couple of weeks were quiet. I started putting together a business plan for the garage, Dad's dream for me that I'd buried after the will reading. I scoped out some local commercial properties and met with a small business loan officer. The hidden account was a solid foundation, but I'd need more to make it real. For the first time in years, I felt like I was finally building something of my own. And then the past came knocking again. It started with a letter. A thick one, from a law firm I didn't recognize. I thought maybe Mark was trying to get cute, sue me for harassment, or something. But the letter wasn't about him. It was about Dad. Apparently, there was an unpaid business loan from 15 years ago tied to an LLC my father had formed, and I was listed as a successor because he never officially dissolved it. The debt? $62,000. My jaw hit the floor. I didn't even know Dad had an LLC, let alone that he'd borrowed against it. Worse, I was listed as a co-signer, which made no sense because I would have been in high school when he filed that paperwork. I called the law firm. "Mr. Taylor," the woman said, "you're listed as a successor and a co-signer on file. If the estate doesn't cover the debt, the responsibility falls to you." I laughed. "That can't be right. I never signed anything. I was a kid. Unfortunately, we have scanned documents with your name." My heart dropped. "With my signature?" There was a pause. "We're reviewing that." I hung up and sat on the floor of my living room, feeling the walls close in. Amanda crouched next to me. "Could he have faked your signature?" she asked softly. I didn't answer. Because in my gut, I already knew. That night, I opened a bottle of whiskey and pulled out a file I'd been avoiding. One of the scanned PDFs on the USB Dad left me had been titled, "Backup Docs, Do Not Share." I hadn't looked at it before. Part of me didn't want to know. But now, I had no choice. Inside were scanned copies of contracts, tax documents, and handwritten notes, stuff that looked like it had been hidden for a reason. And near the bottom, I found what I was looking for. A loan agreement from 15 years ago. Signed by my dad. And someone who was not me. But the signature? It was my name. Sloppy. But close enough. He forged it. Dad had forged my name on a business loan when I was a teenager. I felt sick. The man who wrote me a letter about how proud he was, who tried to leave me a secret fund, he'd also roped me into decades-old debt without my knowledge. Amanda was speechless. She just stared at the screen, then back at me. "What are you gonna do?" "I don't know." I couldn't afford a legal battle. The estate had already been settled. The will was finalized. The hidden account was likely safe because it wasn't tied to the LLC, but if a court decided to dig deeper, I could lose it all. Or worse or more. I was furious. Confused. Hurt in a way I didn't know how to describe. Dad had tried to do right by me in the end, but he'd left a minefield behind. And Mark? I couldn't tell him. Not yet. 3 days later, Mark called me out of nowhere. "You gave me 10 grand. He said. "Now I owe you." "Yeah," I said. "You do? Well, I've got something you should see. Can you meet me at the house?" I was suspicious, but I went anyway. When I got there, he led me to the attic. Dusty, cluttered, full of old boxes. He handed me one marked, "Estate, do not toss." "I found this in the crawl space," he said. Didn't even know it was here until I moved some stuff around. Inside were stacks of paperwork, old photo albums, and a black ledger notebook. I flipped it open. At the top of the first page, "Repayment plan, if I go before I fix this." It was Dad's handwriting. It listed every debt he owed. Every mistake. Who he borrowed from, when, and how much. A full confession. And at the bottom, "If either of my sons finds this, know that I tried. I made mistakes. But I wanted to fix them before I went. I'm sorry." Mark sat down beside me. I didn't know about any of this. He said. I believe you. I said. But now we've got a bigger problem. I told him about the LLC. The forged signature. The looming $62,000. He ran a hand through his hair. Jesus. For the first time, he looked like he didn't have a plan. We have to fix this together, I said. Or we both go down. He nodded. And just like that, the balance shifted again. Not in anger this time, but in survival. I never thought I'd say this, but by the end of that week, Mark and I were sitting at the same kitchen table, working together. Two grown men, one who inherited everything, the other who got nearly nothing, trying to unravel the mess our father left behind. We spread out documents from the ledger Dad kept, our laptops open, phones buzzing. It was like a crime scene investigation, except the crime was emotional bankruptcy. Dad hadn't just taken out one loan under the LLC. He'd taken out 3. One was legit, one had Mark's name forged, and one had mine. Mark's face went white when he saw the second one. I don't even remember this, he said. I was in grad school. Welcome to the club, I muttered. Turns out our father had a habit of using our names when he needed quick cash. He probably told himself he'd fix it before we ever found out. But then he died. And now we were holding the pieces. Mark's tone changed after that. The smugness faded. The arrogance softened. It was like, for the first time, he saw me not just as the screw-up little brother, but as someone who got burned just as bad as him, if not worse. We need a lawyer, he said. One that handles estate fraud. I can't afford one. I'll pay, he said quickly. This affects both of us. That was the first real olive branch he'd ever offered me. So we found a local attorney who specialized in probate and financial disputes. We sat down with her and laid everything out. The forged signatures, the hidden account, the debts, the ledger, all of it. After 2 hours, she leaned back in her chair and said, Well, boys, you've got one heck of a mess. She told us there might be a path. If we could prove the signatures were forged through handwriting analysis, timestamps, and school records placing us out of town at the time of signing, we might be able to nullify the debts. But, she warned, it won't be quick. And it won't be cheap. Mark nodded. We don't care about quick. We care about clean. Then she turned to me. That private account your father left you. If we can tie it directly to him, and not the estate or the LLC, it's probably safe. But if you move that money too fast, and someone starts digging, they might try to freeze it just to be safe. So I left it alone. I wanted to open my garage more than anything, but not at the cost of losing everything to a loophole. Meanwhile, Amanda and I were barely staying afloat. She picked up extra shifts at the hospital. I took side jobs on weekends, fixing AC units and duct systems for whoever would pay cash. Our apartment lease was coming up. Rent was rising again. I didn't want to move, but we couldn't afford to stay. One night she came home exhausted and just said, If we don't get some kind of miracle soon, we're gonna have to pack up. I didn't say anything. Just hugged her and nodded. That same night Mark called. You're gonna want to see this, he said. He'd been going through more of Dad's files and came across something unexpected, a safety deposit box key, taped to the bottom of an old tax folder. The bank name was one I didn't recognize. We went together. The manager was skeptical until we showed our IDs and Dad's death certificate. Once they confirmed everything, they brought out the box. It was heavy. Inside was a small stack of cash, maybe $6,000, wrapped in paper bands. But that wasn't the surprise. There were also deeds. One to a small plot of land in North Carolina, and another to a storage unit business. An LLC with Dad's name on it, and no mention of ours. Mark and I stared at each other. What the heck? I whispered. The documents showed Dad had quietly purchased the business 6 years ago. It wasn't huge, just 12 units on a small lot, but it was debt-free. The bank statements showed regular monthly income. Modest, but steady. He'd never told us. It wasn't even mentioned in the will. That meant, it wasn't part of the official estate. Which meant, it was still up for grabs. Mark and I sat in the parking lot in silence for a long time. Then he said, We split it. 50-50. I raised an eyebrow. Why? Because I've been a jerk. And because Dad clearly didn't trust either of us with all the truth. But maybe we can do better. I didn't say yes. But I didn't say no either. We signed the transfer papers together a week later. Things started to shift after that. Amanda and I moved into a smaller place. Nothing fancy, but affordable. I used some of the income from the storage units, after clearing it legally with our lawyer, to finally start the first phase of my garage project. Just a rented bay at a local auto shop. But it was a start. Mark kept managing the rental house and the rest of Dad's properties. We were still very different people, but now, we had a weird kind of truce. Until I got a phone call that changed everything, again. It was from a woman named Cheryl. Is this Ryan Taylor? Yes, I said cautiously. I think we might be related, she said. And I think you should know what your father did to my mother. I never thought I'd say this, but by the end of that week, Mark and I were sitting at the same kitchen table, working together. Two grown men, one who inherited everything, the other who got nearly nothing, trying to unravel the mess our father left behind. We spread out documents from the ledger Dad kept, our laptops open, phones buzzing. It was like a crime scene investigation, except the crime was emotional bankruptcy. Dad hadn't just taken out one loan under the LLC. He'd taken out 3. One was legit, one had Mark's name forged, and one had mine. Mark's face went white when he saw the second one. I don't even remember this, he said. I was in grad school. Welcome to the club, I muttered. Turns out our father had a habit of using our names when he needed quick cash. He probably told himself he'd fix it before we ever found out. But then he died. And now we were holding the pieces. Mark's tone changed after that. The smugness faded. The arrogance softened. It was like, for the first time, he saw me not just as the screw-up little brother, but as someone who got burned just as bad as him, if not worse. We need a lawyer, he said. One that handles estate fraud. I can't afford one. I'll pay, he said quickly. This affects both of us. That was the first real olive branch he'd ever offered me. So we found a local attorney who specialized in probate and financial disputes. We sat down with her and laid everything out. The forged signatures, the hidden account, the debts, the ledger, all of it. After 2 hours, she leaned back in her chair and said, Well, boys, you've got one heck of a mess. She told us there might be a path. If we could prove the signatures were forged, through handwriting analysis, timestamps, and school records placing us out of town at the time of signing, we might be able to nullify the debts. But, she warned, it won't be quick. And it won't be cheap. Mark nodded. We don't care about quick. We care about clean. Then she turned to me. That private account your father left you. If we can tie it directly to him, and not the estate or the LLC, it's probably safe. But if you move that money too fast, and someone starts digging, they might try to freeze it just to be safe. So I left it alone. I wanted to open my garage more than anything, but not at the cost of losing everything to a loophole. Meanwhile, Amanda and I were barely staying afloat. She picked up extra shifts at the hospital. I took side jobs on weekends, fixing AC units and duct systems for whoever would pay cash. Our apartment lease was coming up. Rent was rising again. I didn't want to move, but we couldn't afford to stay. One night she came home exhausted and just said, If we don't get some kind of miracle soon, we're gonna have to pack up. I didn't say anything. Just hugged her and nodded. That same night, Mark called. You're gonna want to see this, he said. He'd been going through more of Dad's files and came across something unexpected, a safety deposit box key, taped to the bottom of an old tax folder. The bank name was one I didn't recognize. We went together. The manager was skeptical until we showed our IDs and Dad's death certificate. Once they confirmed everything, they brought out the box. It was heavy. Inside was a small stack of cash, maybe $6,000, wrapped in paper bands. But that wasn't the surprise. There were also deeds. One to a small plot of land in North Carolina, and another to a storage unit business. An LLC with Dad's name on it, and no mention of ours. Mark and I stared at each other. What the heck? I whispered. The documents showed Dad had quietly purchased the business 6 years ago. It wasn't huge, just 12 units on a small lot, but it was debt-free. The bank statements showed regular monthly income. Modest, but steady. He'd never told us. It wasn't even mentioned in the will. That meant, it wasn't part of the official estate. Which meant, it was still up for grabs. Mark and I sat in the parking lot in silence for a long time. Then he said, We split it. 50-50. I raised an eyebrow. Why? Because I've been a jerk. And because Dad clearly didn't trust either of us with all the truth. But maybe we can do better. I didn't say yes. But I didn't say no either. We signed the transfer papers together a week later. Things started to shift after that. Amanda and I moved into a smaller place. Nothing fancy, but affordable. I used some of the income from the storage units, after clearing it legally with our lawyer, to finally start the first phase of my garage project. Just a rented bay at a local auto shop. But it was a start. Mark kept managing the rental house and the rest of Dad's properties. We were still very different people, but now, we had a weird kind of truce. Until I got a phone call that changed everything, again. It was from a woman named Cheryl. Is this Ryan Taylor? Yes, I said cautiously. I think we might be related, she said. And I think you should know what your father did to my mother. Part 6 coming next. A woman steps forward claiming to be Ryan's half-sister, and reveals a whole other life their father kept hidden, with financial and emotional consequences that flip everything upside down. Next. ChatGPT. Here's part 6 of the Reddit-style YouTube story. My brother inherited everything. Then he asked me for a loan. Part 6. My half-sister showed up, and so did the truth about Dad's second life. Are you still there? The woman asked. I was gripping the phone so tight, my fingers ached. Yeah, I said. I'm here. She took a breath. My name is Cheryl Holloway. I'm 32. My mom's name was Diane Holloway. I believe your dad, Carl Taylor, was also my father. I said nothing. Couldn't say anything. She went on. I've got photos. Letters. Some financial records. I'm not here to take anything from you. I just thought you deserved to know. I agreed to meet her the next day. Amanda thought I was nuts, but she came with me anyway. We met Cheryl at a diner off the interstate, neutral ground. She walked in wearing jeans and a green hoodie, looking just as nervous as I felt. When she saw me, she froze. You look like him, she whispered. That hit harder than I expected. She pulled out a folder from her tote bag. Inside were old photographs. My dad, younger than I'd ever seen him, standing next to a woman I didn't recognize. A little girl, maybe 5 or 6, on his shoulders. That's me, she said, tapping the photo. There were also cards and letters, handwritten. None of them addressed directly to her, but all from my father. I'm sorry I can't be there more. Diane, I promise I'll send the rest next month. Please don't tell the boys. They wouldn't understand. Amanda flipped through them while I just sat there, staring at the past I never knew existed. So what happened? I finally asked. Why now? Cheryl took a sip of water. My mom passed 2 years ago. Cancer. Before she died, she told me the truth. Said my father had another family, your family, but that he still supported us financially on and off. She never pushed him to be a full-time dad. Said he was complicated. That word again. Complicated. Turns out it didn't just mean emotionally unavailable. It meant double life complicated. I told Mark everything that night. He didn't speak for a full minute. Then he muttered. Of course he did. You're not shocked? He shook his head. I always felt like Dad was hiding something. You ever wonder why he was so obsessed with keeping his financial stuff private? Or why we were never allowed in his office without him? I had wondered. But not like this. Then Mark asked the obvious question. What does she want? She says nothing, I replied. She just wanted to be known. But Amanda wasn't buying it. She brought documents, she said. She's digging. People don't come out of nowhere unless they've got a reason. And sure enough, Cheryl called me 2 days later. I looked up the business you two inherited, she said carefully. The storage unit one. My mom helped him buy that. I have the receipts. That money wasn't just his. I nearly dropped the phone. She emailed me copies, dated bank transfers from her mother's account. Thousands of dollars wired to our dad's LLC. Amanda stared at the screen, her mouth open. If that's true, she said, then Cheryl might have a legal claim. I called our lawyer right away. She confirmed it. If Cheryl's mother had a financial stake in the business, even informal, and if Cheryl could prove it came from marital funds or long-term partnership, she might be entitled to a portion of the business. And that meant Mark and I could lose it. Mark was furious. This is getting out of hand, he snapped. Are we gonna have random siblings popping up every year now? She's not random, I said. She's our sister. No. She's someone with paperwork and a story. And if we're not careful, she'll take what's left. I could feel the old resentment rising between us again. The fragile truce we built was starting to crack. But I couldn't ignore the truth. So I did something Mark never expected. I invited Cheryl to the storage lot. We walked the grounds in silence. The place wasn't fancy, just a gravel lot with 12 units and a rusting fence, but it was profitable. Cheryl looked around slowly. He used to tell my mom this would be their future, she said. That one day he'd sell his house and they'd retire somewhere quiet with the money. I didn't know what to say. Because how do you respond to that? Our dad had promised her family a life, just like he'd promised us things he never delivered. When we sat down, I asked her plainly. Are you planning to make a claim? She hesitated. I'm not sure. My mom never got anything from him. No estate payout, no pension, nothing. She paid into his dreams, and then he died and left her with nothing. I nodded slowly. I get it. But you showing up now? It's like throwing a grenade into what little we've got left. I'm sorry, she said. I wanted to know my family. Even if it's messy. That night, Amanda and I talked for hours. I don't think she's lying, I said. She's not, Amanda replied. But that doesn't mean she's not dangerous to your future. I looked at the numbers again. The income from the storage units was stable, but nothing huge. If Cheryl took even a third, I'd lose the garage project. Everything I'd built on the edge of that inheritance would crumble. But if I fought her, I'd be turning my back on a sister I never knew I had. And deep down, I knew the old me, the guy scraping by on HVAC jobs, wondering why he was always second place. He would have wanted someone to believe him, too. So I made a decision. The next day, I met with Cheryl again. No lawyers. No tension. Just me and her at the same diner. I want to offer you something, I said. A third of the monthly profit. Not ownership. Just a cut. It's not a legal settlement. It's just family trying to make things right. She stared at me. Why? Because I've been on the other side, I said. The one getting nothing, wondering if I mattered. I'm not doing that to someone else. She nodded, eyes misting up. Thank you. I wasn't sure if Mark would ever forgive me. But at least I could sleep at night. Mark didn't yell when I told him about the deal with Cheryl. He didn't throw anything or slam a door. He just stood in our dad's old driveway, staring at me like I'd grown two heads. You did what? He said finally. She's not going away, I told him. We either fight her in court and blow tens of thousands, or we acknowledge she's part of this family and move forward. His jaw clenched. She's not part of this family. I took a breath. She is, Mark. Whether we like it or not. And if Dad had handled things differently, maybe this wouldn't even be an issue. But we're stuck cleaning up his mess. He turned and walked a few steps toward the fence, then spun around. You just gave up income. That's your future, Ryan. No. That's our future. And I'm trying to make sure we don't burn what's left of it to the ground. He didn't speak to me for a week. Amanda said it was probably a good thing. Let him be angry, she said. At least he's feeling something other than control for once. Then came the final twist. Mark called me early one morning, sounding strange. I was clearing out one of the storage units, the one that had all Dad's old office stuff. Yeah? There was another safety deposit box key, taped under a desk drawer. My stomach dropped. Where? First Federal Bank. Branch downtown. You coming? Absolutely. We met at the bank an hour later. No small talk this time. The box was smaller than the last, and lighter. The manager unlocked it and stepped back. Inside was a sealed envelope and an old Polaroid photo. I pulled the photo out first. It was our dad. Older. Standing next to a teenage boy I'd never seen before. They were at a fishing dock somewhere, both smiling like nothing in the world was wrong. Mark picked up the envelope and opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. One line stood out like it was printed in bold. His name is Alex. He's your brother. I never told anyone. He lives in Montana. I've been sending money for years. Mark and I just stood there. He finally muttered. You've got to be kidding me. Nope. Dad hadn't just hidden debts. He'd hidden another son. The letter included a mailing address. No phone number, no last name, just Alex, care of Spring Pine Ranch. Dad had been sending checks regularly, according to attached bank slips, anywhere from $300 to $500 a month. Every single month. Amanda and I stayed up all night trying to piece things together. The dates lined up with Dad's fishing trips, out west, which I always thought were just vacations to clear his head. Turns out, he was visiting another child. And all the while, Mark and I were left cleaning up the estate, scrambling to deal with surprise debts, and handing off parts of our inheritance to people we never even met. Until now. I wrote Alex a letter. It felt weird. Like writing to a ghost. What do you even say to a half-brother you've never met, whose existence was buried under decades of lies? I kept it short. I'm Ryan. I believe we share a father. If you're willing, I'd like to talk. I mailed it and waited. 3 weeks later, I got a letter back. His handwriting was messy. Casual. I've known about you and Mark since I was a kid. Dad used to bring pictures. Said you two were a little older, and that you didn't know about me. He told me he didn't want to confuse things. He helped me with bills sometimes. Bought me my first car. But I haven't seen him in 3 years. I'm not angry. Just tired. I'd be open to talking. But I'm not looking for anything. Alex. I read the letter twice. Amanda read it 3 times. Do you believe him? She asked. I don't know, I said. But I'm going to find out. Mark didn't want to go. Let sleeping dogs lie, he said. We've done enough. This isn't our responsibility. It is, I said. Whether we like it or not. He didn't come with me. I flew to Montana alone. Spring Pine Ranch was more of a farm than a ranch, fenced pasture, a weather-beaten barn, a rusted pickup in the driveway. Alex met me out front, wiping grease off his hands with an old towel. He looked familiar. Same jawline as Dad. Same annoyed squint when the sun hit just right. We shook hands. Then sat on a bench near the barn. I appreciate you coming, he said. I figured one of you would reach out eventually. We talked for hours. About Dad. About growing up not knowing each other. About what it means to be family when your father spent his whole life making sure none of his kids ever met. Alex didn't want money. He didn't want ownership. All he wanted was the truth. And after sharing mine, I felt lighter. Like the final weight had lifted. When I flew back, I sat down with Mark again. Told him everything. He didn't say much. Just stared out the window. Then he said, "You're a better man than I gave you credit for." It wasn't an apology. But it was close enough. The first day I opened my garage, I cried. Not in front of anyone, of course. But later that night, when I closed up and turned the sign to close, I stood there with the keys in my hand and let it hit me. Dad never saw this. But I built it anyway. It wasn't much, a small 3-bay shop off a side road near town, but it was mine. I did oil changes, brakes, engine work, the kind of repairs I used to dream about while busting my knuckles under other people's hoods. Amanda brought pizza for the soft opening, and a few regulars from my HVAC days stopped by. My first customer was a 2002 Ford Explorer that needed a new water pump. I charged a fair rate and did the job right. It felt good. It felt earned. Mark didn't show up. But a few days later he sent me a text. Saw the sign driving by. Looks good. Dad would have been proud. Hope you are too. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry. I just didn't know what to say anymore. We were brothers, sure, but more like business partners now. Casual allies. Maybe that's all we were ever meant to be. As for Cheryl, she decided to move to a town nearby. I spent so much time avoiding my dad's shadow, she told me one day. But now I feel like I'm stepping into my own light. We still talked once a week. I gave her the same cut from the storage unit income each month, direct deposit. She never asked for more, never questioned it. Just said thank you. One night she brought over a photo of her mom holding her as a baby. She asked me to hang it in the garage office, next to the photo of Dad I kept on the shelf. I want her to be here too, she said. So I did. Side by side. Then came the letter. It showed up in the mail one gray Thursday morning, addressed to both Mark and me. Handwritten return label. No postmark. It looked like someone had dropped it straight into the box. The envelope was thick and sealed with red wax. Inside was a short letter, typed on yellowing paper. To Carl Taylor's sons. You don't know me, but I knew your father better than most. I was his business partner, silent and forgotten by design. He made many mistakes. But he also tried, in his own twisted way, to fix them. If you're reading this, then he's gone. Which means it's time I tell you the truth. There's one more account. One he never touched. Not for himself. Not for Diane. Not even for Alex. It was for your mother. She asked him to set it up years ago, told him she didn't trust anyone, not even him, to protect what little she had. So he did. Reluctantly. And then he forgot about it. There's $43,000 in it. The access info is in the second envelope. You can split it, burn it, donate it, whatever you choose. But now, finally, everything is in your hands. SR. Mark and I sat on his back porch reading it again and again. We were quiet for a long time. Then he said, You think it's real? I nodded. Feels real. We opened the second envelope. It was real. A small bank in Nebraska. Account in our mom's maiden name. Dad had transferred funds into it over 15 years ago, right after they divorced. He never touched it again. Mark laughed. I guess she didn't trust either of us. Smart woman, I said. We split the money. No arguments. No tension. Just quiet understanding. Life went on. The debts were cleared. The forged signatures were challenged, and the courts ruled in our favor. That old LLC? Officially closed. The house stayed in Mark's name, but he started renting it out full-time and moved into a smaller place. Cheryl got a job at the local elementary school. Alex and I kept in touch, writing letters like it was the 1960s. He wasn't ready to meet the others yet. Maybe someday. The garage kept growing. I hired my first part-time helper, some kid named Ethan who reminded me a little too much of myself at that age. Greasy hands. Sharp tongue. Big heart. And one morning, I stood outside the shop, coffee in hand, watching the sun come up over the parking lot. Dad had tried to control everything. The house. The business. The will. Even us. But in the end, his control died with him. What was left was ours. Messy. Complicated. But real. And that was enough.